everyone, I'm Ebony Love from LoveBug Studios, and today's video we're going to talk about how to cut isosceles triangles using the triangle in a square die. Now this particular die that we're going to talk about today is a Sizzix die, and we're going to demonstrate the cutting on the Big Shot Pro. Let's take a look at this die. This die is known as the triangle in a square shape, and it has two shapes on the die. One is an isosceles triangle, and the other is what looks to be like a half rectangle triangle, if you will, because it's tall and skinny. So what's meant to happen is you would cut this piece out of a contrasting fabric. You would cut two of them and stitch them to either side of this centerpiece, and that would create a finished square. Because I'm talking about this die in the context of the 1,000 pyramid block, we're only going to use this triangle, which is an isosceles. A lot of people think that this is an equilateral triangle, but it's actually just a little bit narrow on one edge than it is tall. And that's important to know because looks can be a little bit deceiving, and once you get this shape off of the die, you want to make sure that you're not going to stitch it together incorrectly. And I'll show that to you when we do a little bit of cutting. You can see that I have marked on this die only the isosceles piece, and in a different video down the road I will talk about the triangle in a square pattern. But I have drawn some registration lines here on the die, and I've marked that this shape takes a 5x5 piece of fabric to cover the shape. Now I could work from strips, but because I'm doing a scrappy 1,000 pyramid, in that context, I think when I see this 5x5, I immediately think charm square. And a charm square, as you know, is a 5" by 5" square. And you might think that that is wasteful because you're going to be wasting essentially this piece, but if you think ahead just a little bit in how you're cutting, you can really make use of the fabric that you're cutting on these sides. I am an avid collector of charm packs. I am embarrassed to tell you how many charm packs I actually own, but I stacked them up one day and I had a stack about this high on the table, and I couldn't add any more to the top because it would have toppled over, but I have an insane amount of charm packs. And part of the issue with having so many charm packs is that I don't like cutting into them, and so I'll buy an extra charm pack which is supposed to encourage me to cut into them, and then I end up keeping both charm packs anyway. So this project is the perfect use for one of my charm packs, which is actually a charm pack that I got from a quilt shop. I don't even remember where we were, but I got this charm pack and I only bought one, and there aren't any more, and I have no idea what this fabric is. So this is actually a perfect project for me to cut up using this die, because I don't know what else I'm going to do with these. And this project, if you're part of the die cut scrap make later along, it's all about using up your scraps. And to me, a scrap is anything that really just doesn't have a purpose that I can think of anytime in the near future or in the future. So let's go ahead and cut this up. So I talked about thinking ahead about how you actually cut these squares on the die. So what I'm going to do is now this is a Sizzix die, so it takes up to 8 layers of fabric. So I'm going to be a little bit thoughtful about how I place my fabric here, and you can see that I do have some repeats, and I'm noticing that this scrap pack is not cut square. So they clearly did not die cut these because they are not all 5 inches square. So this is also a very great use of fabric that's not cut exactly the way that it needs to be. So notice that I laid the first fabric right side up, and this one is right side down, and you're going to see why I'm doing that in just a minute. Right side up and right side down. And you'll also notice that I'm sort of putting these extras off to the side. I don't know what I'm going to do with these yet, but I just noticed that it is there are duplicates of every print, and so I'm just pulling out the duplicates. So I don't really have a plan for this project yet. So this is a solid, so there isn't a right side up or right side down, but I do want to sort of keep my sequence in here so that I can remember what I'm doing. So I think that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've got 2 more that I can lay on here for this die. Right side up and right side down. I need to lay my mat on top, and let's take this to the cutter. I am cutting with the Sizzix Big Shot Pro today, and I want to talk a little bit about cutting using a Sizzix die on the Big Shot Pro. There are a couple of differences that you'll need, and in other videos that I've demonstrated, I've really showed it adapting studio dies and Go dies, but I haven't really talked about how to run a Sizzix die in this machine. The machine comes with the tray, so you always want the tray in the machine first. There is this material that's called a Sizzix adapter pad. This goes face up inside the tray, and then you need an acrylic mat, and not sure you can see it, but I'm hanging on to it, and then this acrylic mat goes on top of the adapter pad. So you've already started creating a little bit of a sandwich. Your next item is the actual Sizzix die with the fabric, and you need a mat on top. Now, some of you have seen me also cut where I'm offsetting the mat, and I'm going to run this die through with the mat offset up here at the top, and the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to cut this shape, and so I will not want to sort of etch my mat with this shape when I don't need to. So I'm going to insert this into the tray in the direction that I want to cut, and if I give it a little bit of a shove, the handle will lift up slightly, and then I can turn it in the direction of the cut. So let's take a look at this on the other screen. So I'm taking off my mat here, and I'm going to pull out these triangles, and before I get, I've got a couple of corners sort of stuck in the die there, so I just yank those out. Before I move this too much, what I want you to do is just cut the extra scrap pieces off. So I've got a pair of scissors handy, and I'm cutting this narrow piece that's at the top, so I don't want this shifting too much. I'm not overly concerned with it, but I'm just going to cut this off, so that part, so this is the actual waist, and then I'm going to cut this narrow piece in between these shapes. So I just turn that around so I could cut it better. All right, so I've got those pieces cut off, and what I'm left with are these sort of half rectangle shapes. And you'll notice that if I pull off these first two and try to match them together, they don't match. They're mirrors of each other, and so I couldn't, well, I could stitch these together like this if I wanted to do some sort of round shape, but what I really want is to take advantage of that half rectangle. So if I take the next piece, which was cut face up, look at how those match. So I can take the other piece and I get the opposite half square. If you're cutting solids, that piece is not going to matter, that face up, face down piece, but if I am cutting prints, if you do that, one is face up and the next one is face down, you're going to be able to mix and match these and use these half rectangles. You can use that in a border, you can piece something that's a little bit wonky, you can use it in your backing. So I never think of those pieces as waste. I think of it as a design opportunity for another project. So just think about that when you're cutting. especially if you want to use charm squares here. So now that we've dealt with these half rectangles, let's talk a little bit about why this triangle is isosceles and not equilateral. So it looks equilateral when you just look at it face on, but when you lay these side by side, you'll see that if I lay them this way, their edges align. If I turn one of these the wrong way, you'll see that the side is shorter than it is when it's turned the other way. So it's a little bit, it's I think easier with this one to see that it is isosceles and not equilateral, but with some of the smaller ones it's not as obvious. So just be careful when you're piecing and don't turn your triangles the wrong way. You can certainly stitch them on this side, you can stitch them on this side, but be careful not to stitch them this way unless the diamond part is what you're going for. Then you'll have to deal with set in pieces, and those aren't as fun. So I hope this video was helpful to you and you are able to think through a little bit about how you're going to use your scraps for this. As I said, charm squares are a perfectly valid use for these, especially if you're just going to stare at your charm packs and not use them in a project like I do. So I'm well on my way to using this charm pack in a project. I'm just going to kit this up and put it away so that I can stitch it later. Hope you had fun with this video, and we'll see you cutting another day. Thank you.